name is Paula Walowitz. We're at my house in what I call my little nest, which is like, laying down, mostly, often, sitting in front of the TV. Yeah, that's where we're at.
I've certainly known and covered you for over 3 decades in the work you've done in the LGBT community. Back then, the lesbian community, really, as we called it. Can you talk about your first memories of coming out and being in the women's community and when that was?
Yeah, my first memories of coming out as a lesbian. I went to school at University of Illinois in Urbana, and I was there when they had the first National Women's Music Festival. And at that point, I would say I was not out to myself, to anybody. I was not aware of being gay in any way, shape, or form. However, I was fascinated by gay people and lesbians in particular. I was fascinated because at that point, let's see, that was like 1974, something like that. Lesbians were kind of hidden. And when all these lesbians converged on my college campus, it was kind of shocking, and there was a lot of surprise about who they were and what they were there for. I know I was completely enthralled, not attracted to, but unable to really take my eyes off this one woman who was wearing some of the style from that time, which was no shirt but overalls, and she was well endowed. And I remember just being kind of like, this is different. This is different. I mean, that was the main thing that was going through my head, is this is different. And the big story for me of that festival was there was an open mic at the end of Saturday night at the Auditorium Theater there. And I was a straight girl. I was a little dowdy looking, and wasn't much of a performer really at that point, and didn't play an instrument at that point. So I got up, joined the 5 women who were going to be performing, and I sang. I started with Freedom, the spiritual, and got a standing ovation, which was led by Margie Adam and Chris Williamson, who were in the front row.
Wow.
And that was kind of a big kick in the ass for me. That was like, well, yeah. But then I did not realize at that point, it wasn't strictly my performance. It was that they thought I was gay, too. I mean, that was part of the deal at that point, so that when my second song, the only songs I could think of that would work a cappella, was something like, I think it was called A Single Girl, and it was definitely from the point of view of a straight girl, And the reception was substantially less enthusiastic. It isn't like people got up and walked out, but, it was polite. Certainly more polite than, the first song where people really enjoyed that freedom you know.
When you say it was different from what you knew, say a little bit about how you grew up, where you grew up.
Well, I grew up in the south suburbs here, you know, in Chicago. And I grew up in the south side of Chicago up until I was just like, oh, excuse me, I'm probably going to be burping a little. I'm sick. I'm sick, in case you didn't know. Lost a lot of hair.
Mm-hmm.
But I grew up until around age 6 in the city, and then part of white flight moved to the south suburbs with a lot of other working class white families. And Park Forest is where we actually moved to, and that's where I lived until I went off to college.
Was your family very accepting when you eventually came out in the 70s?
No, my family was not very accepting. It wasn't ugly and horrible, but it wasn't a happy time. My father, I was only child. My father doted on me, you know, and I, you know, I loved him very much, and it was very close to him in a lot of ways. But when I came out to him, I had made up my mind I was never going to, because I knew it would upset him. And what's the point? Was my feeling about it. But but I always had it in my head that he would never ask me unless he was ready to hear. Because, I mean, I was pretty much out in the open. I mean, we, like all good lesbians at the time, we de-dyked the apartment every time, you know, like we had family over, and, you know, turned the books around, you know, did that whole thing. And I was in a 2-bedroom place with my first real lover, Tony. The first real relationship with a woman. And that was like her office was that 2nd bedroom, so we had to turn it back into a bedroom. It's like a tiny bedroom, and, you know. And then there was this big bedroom that was mine, allegedly, when my parents would come over. But, yeah, it was really upsetting. Coming out to my dad, when I was with Tony, that was never an issue. But when I ended up with Sarah, who, you know, is now was an ex-girlfriend, is now an ex-boyfriend, you know. My dad had a real hard time wrapping his head around it. At the time, she was, and I have to call her she because she was a she the whole time we were together that I knew about, you know. She was 10 years younger than me. I was supporting her entirely. And that was when my dad was like, something's unnatural is going on here, something wrong, what's going on? Tell me the truth, I want to know the truth. And it was like I really fought with myself, because it's like he didn't really want to know the truth. But he asked, and I had made up my mind if he asked, I would tell him. So we went for a whole year where he could barely speak to me. He was so upset. He felt it as a rejection of him and men, and I don't even understand entirely what it was, but it was I also think there was some weird way that whatever problems I was having, my dad was always blaming my mother for, and now suddenly my mom had something that she could blame him for. She thought it was his fault, you know.
So eventually, did they both come around eventually?
Well, eventually he died. He
Wow.
died within a year of my coming out to him. And I always kind of believed that it was because of that. And it sounds like, like there's this unrealistic I killed him thing, but he wasn't prepared for that piece of information. It just didn't, yeah. And he died of a brain tumor, so it certainly, there could be a connection. I'm not exactly sure what caused what. It could have been the brain tumor that made it so hard for him to wrap his head around this too, some interplay. But, and my poor mama, she and I didn't have that much of a close connection, but when Dad wasn't speaking to me or having a hard time speaking to me, we went out to lunch one time, me and Mom, and she was in tears going, but I'm just afraid you'll be all alone. I mean, that in her head, and I found out later, not even from her at that point, which would have been a perfect time for her to tell me, that her twin brother was gay. Yeah, which I found out from my cousin Jimmy. I never found out from her.
Wow.
She knew, but she could, from her perspective, saying that was like an insult, or if not an insult, a danger. It's risky to say those things. So, but she was afraid that I would be by myself, and so then, and she didn't know too much about anything about that stuff, and she was like, well, what if you get AIDS, and it's like, okay. Let me explain some things. This, that,
We talked a little bit about music before, and music is really how I think a lot of people in the community know you best. And you were not just a singer, but you were a songwriter of some really anthems that are such anthems in the women's movement that people think they're hundreds of years old. And
I love that.
yeah, so talk a little bit about the music you created and what music meant to you, and really were you trained at all in that?
I wasn't trained as a songwriter. I was trained as a singer. I did, starting at age 11, I took voice lessons through high school. I started writing songs actually right after the Women's Music Festival experience. Number one, I had to come up with some songs that, lesbians were going to like. And that was when I started playing guitar too, because you can only do so much a cappella. At least if you're one voice, So, playing guitar was never like my strongest suit, but it supported the music. The songwriting is actually the thing I'm most proud of. I mean, I was kind of proud of my voice. I liked my voice, and I loved singing, and it's kind of rough now that I don't have much time alone at this point, which is probably a good thing. I mean, Jeannie's been phenomenal, because I have not wanted to talk to anybody. I just like, honey, no, don't make me. So she's really been keeping people abreast of what's going on as much as she can. And she's been taking care of me, which, is not, I mean, we have hospice and, that kind of thing, but she's really been she's been great. And music. Yeah, because I don't have that much time on my own, I don't sing much. And when I've tried to kind of sing, even like in the shower, I'm aware that I'm missing notes and that I'm, so I'm not, I have many mixed feelings about it right at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But the songs, not all of them, but there's a few of the songs that I've written that I'm really proud of and that I'm really glad have gotten out there a bit.
They're worldwide, right?
It's so
Tell me the
funny.
story about the one song that in Australia somebody was doing.
That was the first time I'd ever heard of this happening where did I hear it from, I might have heard it from Tony, but I might have heard it from somebody else who then got it to Tony. I don't know, I can't remember how Tony was somehow involved in learning about it, but they taught them She's Been Waiting, at this rally that was a pro-earth, anti-nuke rally in Australia, and it was just put out there as goddess traditional, which I had really mixed feelings about it. It's like, if as long as they're not giving it to Joe Schmo, as they're giving it to the goddess. Okay, But after that I have, when people have offered me money to perform, I won't, not to perform, but to use that song, to use any of my goddess songs, certainly. I always say, just make sure you say my name, I don't really care about the money. And so, I don't get, the only person that you at least used to give me money was a singer-songwriter, I guess a straight woman named Lisa Thiel, who apparently has a number of goddess records out there, and she had originally wrote Goddess Traditional next to my song, and she felt so bad about it that she started sending me royalties, which were, pretty minuscule, but nonetheless, that was kind of interesting. It's like, I don't know, like $30 or something. It was like, okay, okay.
I know you can't sing it, but maybe could you say a few words from that song?
I could sing part of it. Let's see, because that one at least has a small range. Let's see. She's been waiting, waiting. She's been waiting so long. She's been waiting for her children to remember to return.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It's
beautiful. Are there some other songs that you'd like people to know of and to find?
Well, yeah, I really am pleased, yes, to songs that I would like other people to know of mine. And the stuff that is connected to goddess, even though I would say I'm not like, I've sort of gotten the reputation of being kind of pagan or Wiccan or whatever, and I certainly went through a Wiccan period there, but I haven't really been very active for many, many years as Wiccan. But those songs have felt quite real to me in a way. The other ones most of my songs have been, it's hard to say what I want to say without sounding like I'm putting myself down, but most of my songs are kind of throwaway. They're funny, fun, sometimes lucky. If I'm lucky, they're clever, Sometimes it's really the kind of thing where I'm having a rough time or I'm having a bizarre time in my life, and I write a thing about it and sing it once and it's forgotten forever. There have been a couple of songs. One that I sang recently I've been doing most of the singing that I do at the church at Unitarian Church of Evanston, and I sang this one song that I took off of Last Night at School Street, the one cassette that I have. It's so weird because I kind of think of it as a throwaway song. It's called I've Been Fine, but because I only sang it that one time, it's the only time I ever sang it. And so then I sang it at the church, which was probably December, And people came up to me in tears. It was weird. It was like it touched people, and I didn't expect that.
What are some of the words from that?
It's have I been? Well, I don't know what to say. I've been here, but I feel like I've been away. Something's very different, my friend. I'm happier and sadder than I've been, and I've been fine almost all the time. Now don't get worried if you see me crying, 'cause I've been fine almost all the time. This poor heart isn't broken, it's only cracking open. In fact, it's got me hoping for a sign. Pandora for a day with her dreams on display. I don't think I'll regret it, though I may. Anyway, I've been fine.
Wow, it's interesting, the bookend of singing it in December and not having sung it
Right.
in over 2 decades.
Right.
Wow.
Right. I know. It's interesting. It's interesting to see how the music changes. The song "Surprise," Surprise I'm a Lesbian was that, we sang that. Surrender Dorothy came back for the Historical Society, Chicago Historical Society, did it was a very small group of people that came, and that was fine. But what I thought was so interesting was the difference in reaction, because when it came out, when I first started singing it, and even throughout much of the time that I performed it, people would laugh like uproariously at the statement, "Surprise, I'm gay." People at work will, it's like you said something about being. It's amazing how the words just leave you. But it's like you. One day I'll say, "Surprise, I'm gay," and the people at work will smile and say, "That's nice, where are we going to lunch today?" Which people were so hungry for at the time, that when they heard that was funny. There wasn't even a little twitter of laughter at that, and it's because it's old. It's old. People have come to a place where, oh, that's nice. Where are we going to lunch today? It's not true everywhere, and it's not true everywhere, even in the States. But many big cities, even small towns, it's not what it was. And
you mentioned Surrender Dorothy. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Surrender Dorothy was originally just me and Tony. back in the day when, Tony would sit in the shadow way behind me, and sit in the dark and play her bass. And then we pulled in Lori Lee Moses, and Lori Lee was so young at the time. It's like she was a graduate student in music. I don't even know if she was already a graduate student or a would-be graduate student, but she was on her doing experimental music, and some of her music was so unlike what we were doing, but it was basically, it felt like kind of a trade-off. It's like, okay, she'll do the rock and roll goofy stuff that we're doing if we let her just go crazy, and she would go crazy. And it was fun to have her be part of that creative process. And Jane Kreinberg eventually joined for a while, didn't she? Before she moved away, she was a drummer.
But
Right.
women's music, I don't think is a concept people really get. They don't understand how it grew out in the 70s of the early phases of the women's movement and was so lesbian identified, not exclusive, but it was mostly. Mm-hmm. What was women's music to our community, to lesbian women in the 70s and 80s?
It was, your question being what was women's music? What did it mean to the women's movement at that time? And I believe, from where I stood, it was the glue that held us together. There were plenty of people who would go to the Michigan Festival and not even bother going to hear the music. But mostly the music would eventually catch you. Some part of the music would, no, you got to hear Farron. You haven't heard Farron? That was like, people would get dragged away from their drinking debaucheries and stuff just to, and be like, wow, yeah, it's pretty good. And it changed a lot. The music changed a lot. But at the beginning, it really was this sort of folk music, protest song thing. And I think that it got into sort of it got sort of a negative rep in circles that prized the music over the politics in some ways, because there were some musicians who were more activists than musicians, and mostly they came strictly out of protest and folk singing. I'm thinking Alex Dobkin, who is certainly a musician, a great, but mostly she's an activist, mm-hmm. Mostly that's who she was and that's who she is. Even though it was kind of a shock to see her, it might have been 10 years ago, a little bit less, 10 years ago, with her new grandson. It was like, whoa, mind is blown.
Yeah, talk about the separatism of the movement, and also if you want to delve into the trans issues, you having experienced some of that through close connections.
Yeah, that's tough. That one's tough. The separatism thing was always like, there was always some sort of push-pull for that stuff. And the SM too. That was kind of like I was never involved in SM, but I would always pretend that I was, because I was so ticked off sometimes at the whole separatist thing. But I understood the separatist thing, and I kind of I liked the idea of being in the middle somehow, but there wasn't a whole lot of room in the middle. You were either this or that. So, so I just became annoying, I think, to some people, because it was, I thought it was funny. I thought the push against S&M and pro, especially because, 99% of what I saw as S&M was, people spanking each other. It's like, fuck, I'm not sure. I don't care. I don't care, and why do you care? I knew this one young lesbian, but it was young lesbian of many years ago, so she's probably an old lesbian now. But she was volunteering on the collective, and she had the teeniest earrings that were handcuffs. They literally like that big, teeny tiny things. And there was a group of women who wanted her thrown out because it was making them feel unsafe. And it's like, they're this big, they're not going to hurt you. And that whole idea, and this is, I guess, a more serious thing about separatism, that whole thing that you can make the world safe, that it's our job to make spaces safe. I remember the freak out that happened when somebody stole somebody's purse at Michigan, at a time when people were like, oh, well, it's just women, we'll just keep everything wide open and leave everything out for anybody, and it's just like, you can't guarantee safety. Now, then, it just can't be done. All you can do is take some precautions, try not to close your heart, try not to be so, you don't want to be like this, like tightly wound up, but you can't walk around like, I've created a safe space, and these people are women, they would never take $20 out of my purse. It's like, yeah, they would. If they needed $20, they would take your $20. I mean, maybe not everybody would, but there'd be people who would.
Well, let's talk a little bit about relationships over the years. You've had a few impactful. Maybe talk about the ones that were impactful, and then we'll talk about Jean.
Yes. Well, I think if we're talking about, I've had some relationships. I had some relationships at a time when that was like typical. It was not typical to latch onto somebody and be completely monogamous for the rest of your life. That's become a lot more typical now, and I'm glad, actually. I remember when Tony and I first got together, we drove each other kind of crazy because we, of course, in retrospect, she wants to say it was all me, but okay, that it was all my idea to be non-monogamous, but that's not how I remember it. But either way, whatever, that there was this sense that if we were, I remember us saying, if we were independently wealthy, we could do this. We could be non-monogamous, because then we'd have enough time to work out the issues with everybody,
Go to couples therapy with each of them.
With each of your couples, that's right. Because I could not figure out how anybody could be, non-monogamous, like committed to non-monogamy and working full-time. It just seemed like, come on, that's not a life. When do you relax? When do you sit back? It's like, no. But we were, we tried it. We really gave it our all. And actually, I was very committed to non-monogamy long after that relationship was over, and actually it was Jean cured me, and how she cured me was she didn't even know she was doing it, and I don't know if I said this or if she said it when we interviewed before. I can't remember. But when we got together, I said, I've been non-monogamous my whole adult life. You know, I don't know how comfortable I can be being monogamous. And she said the exact perfect thing. You know, she was just like, I wouldn't want you to be anything other than what you are, and if that's who you are, then I want you to be who you are. I just don't know, since I've never been with anybody who, did she say? It was something along the lines of, in the past, when people have been with other people, when they've been with me, it has felt like a betrayal. And I don't know, I can't guarantee that I won't have that same feeling. But I don't know, because I've never actually tried. So I can't guarantee that I would stay together, but I would certainly try. And it was like, you know, I was monogamous from that point on, you know, because it was just like, it's not worth the risk, you know. I mean, I didn't want to hurt her. I never wanted to hurt her, but I also, the idea that she could see it as a betrayal and that it would hurt her enough to not be able to be with me, that was a big thing. But also huge that she put it in the context of, I want you to be who you are, you know, and I will try. Yeah, it's like, okay.
So tell me when you met Jean Durkin and how the relationship progressed, including the marriage in Canada and U.S.
Okay. So my relationship with Jean Durkin and how that progressed. Let's see. I had known Jean on the periphery of my life for a long time. Let's see, 1979, probably met her in the late 70s. But she was with a person who went to Mundelein with her, and I was with the janitor at Mundelein. And so I met Jean through our respective relationships. And really it was years before we got involved. We had flirted, you know, but it was always within the context of, she was always in a monogamous relationship, and I was always not. So, but then it was like, I don't know, I guess the timing was about right. I guess it was about timing, because she had separated herself out somewhat from the coffee house, and she wanted to come back. And so she framed it to me as, you know, I just need somebody to go back with, you know, just so that I can feel a little safer. And so, and the rest is her story. I mean, that was probably April 1990, so when we got together. And
28 years ago this month.
yes. Like many couples, we have lots of dates. April 7th, April 17th, and October, what's coming out day?
October 11th.
October 11th was the actual wedding that we had here. But July 4th was the wedding we had up in Canada. And that was, as soon as it became legal in Canada, we flew up there. And that was a trip. I mean, that article that I wrote for, I kept that around for the longest time. It yellowed. but it was an important article to me because I did put as much detail into it as I could remember and pull together. They were so nice to us. We were not it was Canada, for Christ's sake. I didn't know what to expect. We went to Toronto. When the hotel heard that we were going to City Hall the next day, they gave us the name of a florist. It was like 5 p.m. already, and we were going first thing in the morning, and they made 2 beautiful bouquets for us, and I can't remember if they gave it to us for free or just gave it to us for really, really inexpensive, but it was very surprising. And it was the same weekend that the Harry Potter, I don't know if it was book 5, 6, was one of those. And we couldn't tolerate the idea that we would have to wait for the other one to finish reading it. So for our honeymoon, we just bought 2 copies of the hardcover and we read, I mean, we'd been together since 1990, and that was 2003, I think.
Around that time.
Yeah.
Can you give a perspective to a younger person on what it meant for you to be able to go to Canada and get married?
It was astounding. And the idea that a state, that a recognized country would be saying, yes, you are legitimate. Mm-hmm. That was much bigger than I thought it was going to be. Much bigger. Because even when we decided to do this, it wasn't because my love for you knows no bounds, I must marry you now. It was based on the fact that I didn't have any health insurance and that Jean's work wasn't going to give us health insurance. And possibly they would if I was married to her. So nobody was guaranteeing that, but they were saying that maybe. Mm-hmm. So it meant a lot. It meant a lot to it was strange to us, like, to be there on July 4th because everything in the States is closed on July 4th, but July 4th is wide open in Canada. And but it wasn't a huge crowd or anything. There were maybe 6 same-sex couples at City Hall in Toronto that day. And we met up with it. There was one other lesbian couple. One had flown in. They'd met each other online, and one was from New Zealand, and the other one was from Vancouver. And so, we were their witnesses, and they were our witnesses. That was kind of fun. Sort of sorry we didn't maintain contact, but, people come through your life and that. But it was, and I mean, Canada's just the coolest place. I mean, I think if they had better weather, we might have moved up there a long time ago. We got, and this was in the article too, but it's been a while, the guy who married us was a Wiccan priest. He's one of the guys okayed by the state. I mean, Canada's cool. There's no question. Canada is cool. You're never going to find that here. I don't care how long it I'm sorry, that's never going to happen here.
So you mentioned writing, and so you wrote for us at Windy City Times and Outlines. You did an astrology column.
I did.
You gave sessions on astrology. Can you talk about that period of your life?
Sure. I went back and forth with astrology. As a writer, it was more like fun, although I was also trying to be as accurate as possible to what I had learned.
Let me just say, people still miss your astrology columns. They
miss
ask me about them.
Lady Sadie. Where's Lady Sadie? Yeah, I know. That's always fun. With gay men, that seems to be the one real connection that I have with gay men in writing. It's just like, oh, you're Lady Sadie. But yeah, that was more about like doing something that was kind of fun and connected to what I was learning. I was learning pretty deep stuff. But when I started working with people one-on-one, it really did change what I wanted to do with my life. Because I think up until that point I was still like, write a little bit and sing a little bit, and it doesn't really much matter. But working with people one-on-one, doing their charts, made me realize a couple of things. One, I really liked helping people and working one-on-one. But number two, astrology I felt very limited by in terms of what I could how much I could actually help, which is why I started taking classes to be a therapist. Mm-hmm. And actually what pushed me over the edge into that was I had a dear friend who, I mean, I'd always looked at her chart and thought, I don't know, there's trouble here somewhere, but I don't know what it is. I can't tell. There's trouble. That's all I know for sure. And she had this massive stroke. And I pored over that chart, I would say for at least a year afterward, trying to find what was I missing, what did I not see. And it's like the whole idea of being able to tell the future is not all that really helpful. You want to help people get a perspective on their life. You want to help people make some meaning of their life. I mean, that's really what astrology at its best, from my perspective, is. Mm-hmm. Is just like chaplaincy even, you know, like trying to pull things together that make sense. Because that's what people, they come to astrologers because they're looking for, you know, why is this happening to me now? Or what lesson am I supposed to be learning? Or, you know, how can I make the most of what I have left? Which is my big question now, too, is how do I make meaning from it? Because it's a very, you know, pancreatic cancer, I mean, yeah, you can, there are people who live a while, but the vast majority of people with pancreatic cancer, it's a very short prognosis, I guess. And I don't feel as bad as I know I'm going to feel. That's really depressing, you know. I mean, I know it's going to get really bad, and that is not a happy thought. But I think a lot of my question, you know, because I've been bringing in, because we're now in hospice, and I've been bringing in their social workers and their, you know, because I believe in all, you know, I believe that therapy can help. I believe that social work is a good thing. I believe that even the chaplain, God help me, he's a really nice, really super nice guy. But, yeah. So that's something I'm struggling with, and that was, astrology was kind of a stepping stone for me into doing what I think of as my real work, which is therapy, you know, and helping people to make sense of their lives, which I think is, I really miss doing that work. But I started getting so tired. That was the main thing. It's like pain is bad enough, but pain, they give you an enormous amount of pain medicine when you're in hospice, So at this point anyway, the pain is under some control, but the fatigue is harder. And it's hard when you're trying to really be present for somebody. I mean, that as a interviewer, here it's like you kind of have to be in the moment and be present. And if you're just worn out, it's like I just couldn't keep doing that with my clients. And so I really miss that, and they have all been so fantastic, and I've sent them texts saying I've got to close my practice and stuff like that, and they've all sent me little notes saying what I gave to them and what I did for them, and that is that's been very heartening,
When did you get diagnosed, and kind of what's been going through your mind really recently in terms of saying goodbye to people?
Yeah. Goodbye has been hard. I got diagnosed with the first problem January 15th, so it was just really not that long ago. But then it was, I think, a week, 2 weeks after that is when I got diagnosed with the cancer. And so it's it's mid-April now, and that was like mid-January, end of January. So it's February, March, 2.5 months, and you can say to yourself you're not going to look at how much time they give you, and I've been fortunate that none of my doctors have been like, well, the statistics are blah, blah, blah. But, all you have to do is Google pancreatic and, you can see it all there. And I still have it in my head. It's like I don't feel that awful. I just get really, really tired. But the goodbyes, I have such mixed feelings about how to do that, I mean, with my clients, in some ways it's more straightforward because I see them an hour a week, and what I give them and what I get from them, it's a container. It's this much, and it's a precious this much, but it's this. It's not global the way like family and friends can be and lovers. But it's really, I think being able to say goodbye to Jean is really tough. And I think I've been really hard on her. It's really hard to be out of control. I'm kind of a control freak, my whole life I've been kind of a control freak, and this is tough because I just don't have much control, and it pisses me off, I mean, I don't like not being in control. And I think, Jean gets that, but I'm not as kind to her as I would like to be, so it's not constant, thank God, but, she knows how much I love her, and I tell her that a lot, but I also am like cranky a lot, Do you want this? Do you want that? No. Leave me alone, no. can I get you this? How about this? Because, she was trying for a while to try and get me to eat. And, this cancer's tough on eating, it's just tough. So I haven't wanted to eat, and I've lost a ridiculous amount of weight. And hair. I used to have hair. It's like, I only went through one round of chemo. And I know that there are some people who have judgment about that, because even the oncologist was just like, well, there's a chance you might, it might help, But that first round of chemo was so awful. I couldn't eat, I was in pain constantly, no matter what kind of pain medication they gave me. I was doubled over in pain all the time. I couldn't live like that. I couldn't even if it meant an extra month or two, it's not worth it, And that's all we're talking about. I did have one oncologist who was very clear and kind, because she had said, I said, well, will this help with survivability, the chemo? And she said, well, yes, but only by months, not years. And it was like, okay, that's a good piece of information, Goodbye to people. I don't know the answer to that. It's very complex, because I have some feelings like some feelings that I don't want to say goodbye, obviously. There are also some feelings that are just like, there's something, kind of gives me the willies to even say it out loud, because I don't want anyone to feel bad, but I do think that there are some people who are coming here. I haven't seen them in years, some decade maybe, who are coming to say goodbye. And I have feelings about that are not all positive, It's just like, well, where have you been? But I also I get it sort of, but I have mixed feelings about that.
Mm-hmm. Is there some, big picture thing that you'd like to pass along as either a personal legacy or a community legacy? Like you want the next generation of lesbians to understand?
The main thing is I think we need, and I think that more and more women are doing this, we need to reclaim, the L, that we need to be aware of, the disappearing L, and yeah, maybe it doesn't belong grouped in with all the other letters, maybe it's okay to have an L that stands alone and a T that stands alone, bisexuals, I don't know. Nowadays, I don't know, yeah, you talk to young people. I mean, young women, high school age women, 90% of the women I meet who are high school age say they're bisexual. They've never been with a woman, they probably never will be with a woman, but they call themselves bisexual. It's like, okay. And I think for them it really is a way of being supportive, But I think it's okay to reclaim being a lesbian and to actually have positive feelings around the word and around the label, and You know, I remember when Kate Clinton many, many years ago said, yeah, I'm really just doing this because I love labels. I just love the label. And I think we need to recapture some of that old love the label thing. You know, we don't need to have it be the main thing, but, you know, in order to, there's so much, like even when you say women's music, there's a lot of people who have like these negative views of women's music, that it's not a very, it's not about talent, it's not about music, it's just about politics, and it doesn't really mean anything, blah, blah, you know, and it's like, historically it means a lot, and I think we need to find what it means in this new environment. I think I would like, before I die, I would like to get the songs from Last Night at School Street available on MP3 so people could have access to it. And I think there must be a way to do that. That wouldn't be hard.
We can do that. We will do that for you.
That would be so cool. Just because I think there's music in there, and it's also it was an event. You know, I mean, there's some parts I would love to change because I don't think it's all high quality from beginning to end. But I think even just leaving it as is, but having it on something where people could actually listen to it would be good. Because, I mean, I think I've been fine. That experience made me realize that maybe there are other songs in there that people can respond to that's different than what I had necessarily intended at the time. But the world has changed. Things have changed. People's attitudes are a little different, and I think I would like people to be able to hear that stuff again and see if any of it, you know, resonates now.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that would be great. Can you leave us with maybe a couple stanzas of your favorite of your music?
Oh God, my favorite. Let's see. Oh, favorite. If legacy attaches to me at all, it has to be about goddess stuff. But Oz is a song that it hits me really deep, and so I can sing part of that. Read me a story, let it sparkle, let it shimmer, let it shine. Read me a story, play the music for the dancing in my mind. Play the music for the dancing in my mind. Won't you take me to the Emerald City, where I'll fly on a witch's broom and talk to the trees? Hold council with the scarecrow, play fetch the bone with Toto. Won't you please take me to Oz? Oh, please take me to Oz. Read me a story, let it sparkle, let it shimmer, let it shine. Read me a story, play the music for the dancing in my mind.
When we got married for the second time at the Unitarian Church, Paula had written a song. Do you remember
I Choose You was the name of it, but again, it was one of those ones where I wrote it for a particular thing, and I don't even think I sang it. I gave it off to somebody else to sing.
Well, you
for
were
the-
busy getting married to
I
me.
was getting married.
But that idea that every day is a choice, right? So what are you going to do? Are you going to choose to be with your partner, and what does that look like? Does that look like you're going to just get numb in your work life and come home on the weekends and collapse? Or are you going to choose to be with your partner and try and stay connected and try and stay awake? Try to stay woke in this life of ours, right? How do you do that? And you stumble and you fall and you wake back up again. I was thinking about how one of the things that pulled us together was a tragedy when my brother committed suicide, and Paula stayed with me and my grief with your own grief, until I got happy again. And that's part of a commitment with another person, is that you're going to stay with them. And whatever they're going through right now, it's not going to last. It's going to change. The emotions are going to change.
And actually, we had a lot of death at the beginning of the relationship. I mean,
We
it
did.
was 6 months in that your mother passed away, and it was a few years in that your father. No, how long between
3.
your father? 3 years,
And then,
and then my mother died.
like 3 months later, your mom died. So some of the flowers from my dad,
Yeah.
I bought some flowers that my dad always planted and put it on my back porch. And then when Paula's mom died later, she died July 4th on her birthday.
Well,
or
she
July
died
5th.
close to it. Yeah, 7th, I think.
So I think we ended up using those flowers as a memorial for your mom.
Yeah, we buried her.
Yeah.
We cremated her and buried her with my dad, but put those flowers.
You're right.
Yeah.
Right. So things just keep unfolding, So if you're in a relationship and it's stagnant and you think you want it to last, don't look at the other person, look at yourself.
Smart.
Right? Kick yourself in the ass instead of looking at that other person. You change.
That's probably the biggest lesson in a relationship, actually, right there, is that it has to be about you. It can't be about changing the other person. I think so much of, I mean, I did it to you for years. I think you tried for years with me, to change each other.
Doesn't work. It's very futile and aggravating to
it's
try
frustrating
to force the
yourself.
other person to do something they don't want. That's just a waste of time.
So we hung in there long enough to go, this isn't fucking working. Let's try something different. Yeah.
You know what I think also you taught me was when marriage was possible, you were like, let's get married. I was kind of like, wow, how is that going to look? What's that all about? And only during the ceremony, but after, I really realized that what marriage is about isn't about the wedding, it's about the marriage.
Right.
And the wedding gives you this fuel, right? These connections of people that are doing this commitment to you, right? This commitment that they honor your bond and they will stand by you and they will support the connection and the love that you have. And I think that's something that I really didn't realize was going to happen.
Yeah, I think that was probably one of the strongest parts of the ceremony in Evanston for me was having, we set up something for the congregation to say.
Right.
And they basically, it was something along the lines of, we will support you in your marriage. And that, that's
What?
not something, that's not something that, I didn't certainly ever think that there'd be a community of people in a sort of a spiritual context that they would be turning to us and saying,
Right,
community complex.
Because when we got together early on, do you remember in by Wrigley Field, we got harassed outside that oyster restaurant, and it's like, oh fuck, I can't even, I don't want to hold her hand, I don't want to egg on these people who are going to harass us, right? And then you turn it around a little while later, and you get a whole congregation of people saying, we honor your love, we support you, and we're going to be here. And they have. Paula runs this circle called a covenant group. I run a covenant group. Different groups, different circles. So I have these 80-year-old atheists who love me up and love up Paula and love up our life, and they're at this stage of our lives, they're trying to figure out what to do. Some people are sending us
so desperate
letters
to come up with
and
something.
they want to bring us soup. And they just
Casserole. I can't eat, but she can.
yeah. So.
Do you remember any of the lyrics to the song you wrote about for the marriage?
I might be able to find it. I might be able to find it. I'm not 100% sure I can find it.
That's okay.
Do you remember the song that you wrote before we got together? We were just starting, and it was "You're a Bunch of Wildflowers" by the Song.
Oh, sure, but that's at least
Okay.
on the cassette.
Oh my God, that was amazing to hear Paula sing the song that she wrote for me. And part of me was thrilled, and part of me just like dissociated into the whole of her guitar, going, "Oh my God, my life is changing."
Don't date comics or musicians if you shy.
But I think the sweetest song that got sung at our wedding was, yeah.
There's a Melvin Reynolds song. If you love me, if you love me, plant a rose for me. And if you think you love me for a long, long time, plant an apple tree. The sun will shine,
The moon will glow,
the rain will fall, and the tree will
grow.
know. Whether you comes or whether you goes, I'll have an apple and I'll have a rose, lovely to bite and nice to my nose, and every juicy nibble will be a sweet reminder of the time you loved me and planted a rose for me and an apple tree.
Nice.
Sweet song.
Beautiful.
Sweet.
So let's kind of wrap up. I've taken a lot of your time. Let's talk about what's been going on the last 3 months and what true partnership really is in challenging times.
Go.
So
Got
on
it.
Martin Luther King Day, 2018, Paula fell in the morning, and I asked if she wanted to get help to get up. So then she fell again, and then she said, "I'm going to sleep here for a little bit."
Slept on the floor.
So here's what true partnership is. I pulled a pillow and a blanket for her and a pillow and a blanket for me, and then we slept on the floor for another few hours. Tried again, and when she couldn't get up, I dialed 911. And so...
This time she didn't ask me, she knew better.
yeah. And the community hospital, Weiss, saved Paula's life. They found a big pulmonary embolism that could have killed her, but they found it in time. And then they found out that the cause of the giant pulmonary embolism was pancreatic cancer, stage 4. We decided to get a second opinion at Northwestern. And it was confirmed, and Paula tried one dose of chemo, which sent her back into the hospital. The result is that Paula entered hospice about a month ago, and she's here at home. I think one thing that commitment is that my work is stepping up, and so after my FMLA is done, then I'll be able to have personal leave and continue to care for Paula here at home. I think a lot about why hospice is so good at this stage, and I think it's because of the AIDS crisis. People with AIDS people who loved people with AIDS really worked hard to make hospice work. And, Paula was with a lesbian cancer project, Lesbian Community Cancer Project, LCCP. And there's no LCCP anymore, but there's this incredible cancer support through hospice where nobody cares that we're lesbians, they're happy. A lesbian friend who's a hospice doc is a mover and shaker in the hospice world. And so it's an interesting time, right, to get support where we don't have to, we can get support from the whole world. We don't need just to focus in on the lesbian world to get it.
Although I got to tell you that, like, our social worker at hospice, who's this young lesbian, maybe she's not as young as she looks. To me, she looks like she's 22. She's probably 40. I don't know.
I think it's because we've gotten old. Everybody looks young.
At first I wasn't sure. I thought, oh, she's awfully young. But she's arranging, she said, is there anything that you want to make sure you do? And I said, well, the one thing, and I'm just not sure how I can make this happen, is, I really want to see the Black Panther, and I want to see it in the movie theater. So she's arranging, they're actually digging into their foundation funding to pay for an ambulance to come and take me to the movie theater.
Goodness.
So next
Tuesday,
week we're going to see Black Panther.
I know. I'm
Wakanda.
So
we're going to do it.
It's
going to be amazing.
And I don't know if she wasn't a lesbian that she would go that extra mile. It seems like a little extra mile to me.
I don't know. It feels.
It does feel good. It feels important that she actually asked me what I thought, would be something I need to have happen.
Mm-hmm.
Just like you did. But, yours is a little more legacy-oriented and hers is a little more entertainment-oriented. But, yeah.
And here's a couple of things that Paula has, pushed me away to do. So while you were at Northwestern, the Women's March took place. And you were like, you're not staying here. You got to go to the march. And so...
and we did go to the march
in D.C.
And that was the last march I was at. But yeah.
Yeah, so our friends picked me up. I went to the march. One of them wore Paula's pink hat from D.C. and then I came back and showed Paula a bunch of pictures. Yeah. And I think I'm going to paint the mural in Rogers Park. They have on Father's Day they always have this mural thing, and so
she did it last year too, and so this year should be pretty interesting.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be a bunch of posters of different events from the 60s on up, with Emma on the very top.
You mean Emma Gonzalez?
Emma Gonzalez on top, right?
And Emma Goldman.
Maybe Emma Goldman on the bottom. I don't
just
know.
Like the Emma world.
Right. Maybe we'll see. We'll see how it turns out.
Any final thoughts you want to leave with for your friends, family, community?
No, she's already gotten plenty from me. Go ahead.
I think in the last week I've realized I don't have to be, as a caretaker, I don't have to do everything right. I'm not going to do everything right. I'm gonna mess up. I'm gonna stub your toe. I'm gonna step on your toe.
It was
But-
my ankle, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. But I think it's less about, like, loving each other in hard times is less about trying to be a hero, and it's more about trying to just be a human being. And Paula's been really good teaching me about how to be in the moment. And so we sit here in our home, and we get the chance to see the sun move from the east to the west, and we get the chance to be together, and we get the chance to be relaxed enough to see what tomorrow's going to be. You know, the last couple of days you've been, your fatigue has been bad, your pain has been bad. Today's a good day, and I know there's going to be some more good days.